Congress urging you to? Speaker Doocy, you want to fund Ukraine.
National security begins with border security. We have said that all along. That has been my comment since late October. It is my comment today.
Speaker Johnson said he was slamming this package for excluding the border security provisions. He says he's not going to bring it to the floor if it passes the Senate, which it did, but they could find a way to go around the Speaker.
Right. And he says the reason that the House is not going to bring it up is because it needs border security stuff, which ironically was in the Senate bill last week. But of course, that was kicked to the curb because a bunch of Republicans bailed on it because Donald Trump didn't like it.
Well, it's a good thing the camera wasn't on them, because I can only imagine the whole Fox hosts are burning on the side of Steve Doocy's head.
So, and there is, I was reading this morning in Axios, I believe, there is expectations are at rock bottom that the civil war between the many factions of the Republican Party can be fixed by next week. A lot of Republicans are against it because Donald Trump is against it. But here's the problem for you guys. The Border Patrol Union came out and the acting CBP chief both came out and said it's not perfect, but this is the best thing we've seen in decades. So are Republicans going to say that the Border Patrol Union and the acting CBP chief are wrong?
Well, look, they can have their perspective, Steve, and we've got a lot of respect.
It's their jobs, Tom.
We've
Twice in 2 weeks as well. I mean, don't tell me he's been watching Meidas. There has been a tale of two Doocy's in the Fox News universe recently. A father and son standoff between truth and whatever this is.
That is the current chancellor whose name he could not recall, not the late German chancellor Helmut Kohl, who he told donors that he was meeting with just 2 years ago.
Yes, while Peter Doocy had a memory lapse while reporting on Biden's memory lapse, Fox and Friends host Steve Doocy, or Dad as Peter would call him if he could recall, is daring to push back on Republican lies and disinformation. From reminding Republican Whip Tom Emmer that it's not just the opinion of Border Patrol that the bill Republicans are refusing to negotiate on would help in combating the crisis that they've screamed about for however many years, it's actually their job.
What this would do is it would cap it to where we couldn't take anything more than 5,000. Now, this does not say that we're going to release 5,000 people into the United States. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It says that we will hold single adults in custody. They will not be subject to release. And so that is a huge deterrent. That will deter an awful lot of people from crossing our borders illegally.
A lot of Republicans are against it because Donald Trump is against it. But here's the problem for you guys. The Border Patrol Union came out and the acting CBP chief both came out and said it's not perfect, but this is the best thing we've seen in decades. So are Republicans going to say that the Border Patrol Union and the acting CBP chief are wrong?
Well, look, they can have their perspective, Steve, and we've got a lot of respect.
It's their jobs, Tom.
To today, where he reminded his co-hosts that despite Mike Johnson preaching how there's no bill without border security, he, and I quote, kicked the bill on border security to the curb last week, all to appease the man that Mike claims isn't calling the shots. Okay, sure, Mike, tell that to the quiver in your voice.
Mr. Speaker,
he does have executive authority right now.
Mr. Speaker, you talk about H.R. 2. Again, Senator Lindsey Graham, your Republican colleagues say that stands no chance of passing through the Senate. You have an opportunity to do something right now about the situation at the border, which you've been calling for new legislation on the border since you first took office. But let me ask you about Donald Trump. He said any Republican who votes for this deal should be ashamed of themselves. You've said you speak to him frequently and that you've discussed this deal with him, quote, at length. Is Donald Trump calling the shots here, Mr. Speaker?
Of course not. He's not calling the shots. I am calling the shots for the House. That's our responsibility. And
Speaker Johnson said he was slamming this package for excluding the border security provisions. The Senate bill, he said, is silent on the most pressing issue facing our country, talking about the border. He says he's not going to bring it to the floor if it passes the Senate, which it did, but they could find a way to go around the Speaker.
Right. And he says the reason that the House is not going to bring it up is because it needs border security stuff, which ironically was in the Senate bill last week. But of course, that was kicked to the curb because a bunch of Republicans bailed on it because Donald Trump didn't like it.
Republicans are simply playing outrage politics while their frontrunner talks about giving Vladimir Putin free rein.
Said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay, you're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
But sure, what about Biden's age? How about that New York Times article, huh?
I think that we could safely say this. Both of these men, they're both elderly. They're both going to make mistakes. Only one of them is encouraging Russia to invade NATO countries. So that is the clear difference
Or trying to overturn the 2020 election.
Of course.
Or talks about how he wants to be a dictator.
Right. The stakes are so obvious. And we are seeing the Biden team go on the offensive.
The more the media plays into the age ping pong, the better it is for Trump. I said this yesterday. It's a gift for the MAGA crowd if the discourse is focused on a gaff-off while Trump rolls out the red carpet for fascists. They want the both sides game.
Given all of the things that have happened this week, including, and I know you asked Chris Christie about this, the fact that Donald Trump yesterday suggested that Vladimir Putin should have free rein in attacking NATO allies. Yeah. And what do we see when we wake up this morning? Wall-to-wall coverage of whether a guy who's 4 years older than his opponent is too old to be president. But if we're going to play the gaff game, let's play the gaff game for a moment.
And we have a man who is totally corrupt and the worst president in the history of our country, who is cognitively impaired. We would be in World War II very quickly if we're going to be relying on this man. A very big hello to a place where we've done very well, Sioux Falls. Thank you very much, Sioux Falls. So Sioux City, he built almost 500 miles of wall. Even the Obama administration says it in their stats. They were interviewing him 2 weeks ago, and they said, what would you advise President Obama? Obama dropped missiles, and they ended up hitting a kindergarten. If that's the case, he's going to end up being indicted when he leaves office. They never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people. A lot of people saw those documents. They didn't see the ones we had. We had them locked up, and we had Secret Service all the time because I was president all the time.
But let me tell you, yeah, both sides are old, but both sides don't want to give Putin free rein to attack NATO allies. Only one does.
Out of time, but I did want to ask you, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, to react to Donald Trump's comments where he effectively invited Russia to invade NATO countries that may not have given as much to NATO as they are asked to.
You know, John, you can't put enough adjectives on this to describe how treasonous such a comment is.
That he'll give them a free hand to invade their European neighbors if he's given a second term. And as commander-in-chief, he would have the United States stand back and watch it happen. Let's be clear about what that would mean. Any attack on a NATO ally would trigger a massive show of force by its members across the world. That's because under Article 5, an attack on one is considered an attack on all. Just take it from the NATO Secretary General, who responded to Trump's comments with this, quote, any suggestion that allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security.
Both sides haven't bragged about being the reason that Roe versus Wade was overturned and humored a nationwide abortion ban. Only one has.
Because for 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it. They wanted to get it back, right? You wouldn't have that. There would be no question. Nobody else was going to get that done but me. Yeah. And we did it, and we did something that was a miracle.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
Both sides haven't singled out Muslims as a national security threat and promised to re-implement a Muslim ban if they get back in office. Only one side has. Both sides don't want to gut Social Security and Medicaid. Only one does. Both sides don't want the economy to crash and burn. Only one does.
When there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. The one president, I just don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
Donald Trump hopes millions of Americans lose their money from their 401ks and retirement savings within the next 12 months, so he doesn't look bad.
Both sides don't want to offer tax cuts to the 1% at the expense of the American worker and unions. Only one does.
This is, who did Donald Trump fight for the 4 years he was president? He accomplished two things: an extremist Supreme Court so that politicians, instead of women, would make decisions about abortion. And the second was a $2 trillion tax break, mostly for billionaires and millionaires and giant corporations. What has Joe Biden been fighting for his time in office? $35 insulin, Medicare drug negotiation, trying to cut student loan debt, get rid of junk fees, biggest climate package literally in the history of the world, and paid for by my 15% minimum corporate tax on billionaire corporations.
Both sides are old, yes, but they're not the same.
Because in this election, one of the two candidates fomented an insurrection, didn't lift a finger to stop an angry mob from his supporters from storming the Capitol, or step up to do anything when they were openly threatening to hang his very own vice president. One of the two candidates in this race has bragged about assaulting women, defamed her, and was found liable of doing just that. One of the two candidates in this race is openly threatening to use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies. One of the two candidates in this race is channeling Adolf Hitler in stump speeches. And one of the two candidates said just yesterday that he would encourage Russia to attack our NATO allies. None of that's hyperbole. It's all on tape. So are we really going to make this election about who confuses two states more frequently? What are we doing here? Yes, the age stuff is on people's minds. It is in the political ether. We shouldn't live in denial about that. It's also self-perpetuating, for the most part, by people who have never spent 1 second with Joe Biden. But we cannot let this become the dominant focus of this campaign, because that is not what this election is actually about.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.